Hi everyone, this is Austin of the Noobs and Knockouts podcast. I'm placing this message at the beginning of our first 4 episodes for future context and new listeners. The name of the podcast was not nailed down until after the recording of the 4th episode. It had the temporary title of Austin and David Watch Wrestling, and that is reflected in the episode's content. With that out of the way, please enjoy.
Pulled up a preview of the thing, and this looks cool. Okay, cool.
All right, hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the next episode of Austin and David Watch Wrestling. I'm Austin, that's me. I've watched a lot of wrestling.
I'm David, that's me. I haven't really watched a whole lot of wrestling. I'm starting to. I've kind of been working on it. It's been a bit of a personal project, but as of up till now, I am still disappointingly a bit of an amateur.
All right, so we incredible, but yeah. So our first 2 episodes were kind of about WWE at 2 very different points in time. In WWE in 2013, essentially now, though things have changed since then, but not that much. And then WWE in 1987, during the golden age almost for WWE. Or one of them.
At least what's referred to as like the golden age.
Yes, you could make other arguments, but when WWE talks about their own history, this was like the golden age, man, when Hulkamania was running wild. But today we're going to go into what is the other biggest boom period in WWE, known as the Attitude Era. And this was born... Yep, this was born in the late 1990s. And so actually it is literally a decade off by about a month or 2 from the 80s show. I did not intend for that, but yeah, when we went in the 80s, we went in 1987. This is in 1997. And I put a lot of thought into when we would do this because I feel like we kind of determined last time that we would kind of almost have like different branches and do deep dives into different eras kind of simultaneously. Yes. And so I wanted to kind of start early Attitude Era so we could kind of have a extended kind of time with that era of time, which wasn't very long. Here's where I was going to say it's kind of up for debate when it starts, depending on who you ask and what your kind of criterion is. It can start from as early as mid 1996, and it could start as late 1998.
Damn.
Early 1998. I had that off. So
either way.
For me, either way, there's a kind of a lengthy period of time where you determine where it starts. Everyone kind of has decided where it ends, which is 2001, early to mid 2001.
No, early to mid. Never mind.
Early to mid 2001, pre 9/11.
Pre 9/11. I was gonna say, hold up.
Yeah, though we might talk about the 9/11 show. Maybe. I
would love to talk about the 9/11 show at some point. That sounds like an awful thing to say.
But anyway, we're going to start. For my personal opinion, it starts in early 1997. A very specific point. I forget the exact date, but at one point, but the time when WWE changed its name, it's the name of its show from Monday Night Raw to Raw is War. I would consider that to be kind of the definitive start of the Attitude Era. But first, I kind of want to talk about how we got to the Attitude Era, because 87 to 97 is a huge time of change for WWE, and a lot of stuff happens that I feel is kind of important to understand how we got to 1997.
Curtain Call was in there, right?
Yes, and I will mention the Curtain Call, but we're gonna start our story in 1992. Kind of the explanation of how the Hulkamania period died out. Basically, your answer, steroids. By 1992, WWE had already kind of hit its peak in terms of mainstream popularity, but it was still extremely successful. It's hard to argue that it wasn't like still kind of going strong. It just was beyond when it was at its peak relevance in the pop culture, and that happens. But in 1992 during around that time period was when there was a lot of talk in the sports world about kind of cracking down on steroids and steroid abuse.
Mhm.
And it kind of turned its eye towards professional wrestling as well.
Fair enough.
Even if it's not a proper sport, and I believe Vince McMahon argued in court that he should not be in trouble for this because it's not a real sport. That's one of those like things they don't talk about when they talk about the history of kayfabe and pretending that it's all real to the outside world. When the few times Vince McMahon has gone to court, he has been perfectly willing to say that his wrestling is completely staged, not a real sport, if it means he thinks it will get him out of jail time.
Good old Vince, baby.
Or getting him out of regulations. Like professional wrestling used to be under the auspices of the actual state athletic commissions. Now it's not, except I think in the state of New York. And that was a big argument for Vince, but that's another time. The steroid scandal is basically, there was a doctor, Dr. George Zahorian, who was kind of found out from evidence from kind of searching through his records as a doctor, that he provided steroids for a significant portion of the WWE locker room. And Vince McMahon got brought up on conspiracy on drug conspiracy charges. He was brought up on charges of providing steroids to his wrestlers and forcing them to take them. The result of that case wound up being that basically they could find plenty of evidence that WWE people were involved, but they couldn't really prove that Vince McMahon himself was directly part of the operation, was kind of directing it all. Obviously, the idea that he didn't direct any of it is silly. It's his company.
I feel like from the things you've told me, I kind of go really hard on the Vince McMahon is insane supervillain meme, but for something like this, like, of course he was the puppet master. Just as a noob amateur to all of this, I can say with perfect confidence, of course he was behind this shit.
Like Vince McMahon has always run a very tight ship in WWE. Everything, even today, still goes through him at the end of the day. So the idea that he wasn't really part of any of that is insane. But they couldn't find hard evidence that he was a part of it, so it kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
And it's now become a bit of a meme for Vince McMahon to be like, I beat the federal government. That's how great I am. But the steroid scandal did have far-reaching consequences, even if eventually Vince got himself acquitted. In that, suddenly, WWE was like, hey guys, let's get off the juice. Fast. And that led to a few different ripple effects. Namely being that Hulk Hogan, his biggest star at this point in time, bounced. Because of the steroid thing, and also because he had dreams of making movies. That didn't go well.
Oh, how'd that turn out for you, buddy?
He pieced out in 1992. The same year, you have the Ultimate Warrior, which we never really discussed a lot, but he's kind of a solid number 3 most popular wrestler at this point in time. And he was a bit of an asshole to work with, and he also did steroids big time and didn't really want to quit. So he just kind of quit the company there. And then you have Randy Savage, who did stay, but Vince McMahon was kind of convinced that we need to push younger wrestlers. Like the idea that he thought Randy Savage was too old to kind of still be a top level guy. He was wrong, as history would show, but that was his opinion at the time. And so Randy Savage kind of got pushed down and started being have more an active role as a commentator than a regular wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So in the span of 1 year, he loses his 3 biggest box office draws all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so obviously business kind of quickly went in the toilet.
Yeah, fair enough.
And a lot of his attempts to create a new kind of get a new buzz, like build new stars up in the company to be as big as stars as Hogan and Savage and Warrior, failed in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. it's kind of the birth of the mid 90s, which was the new generation era, because they would have these video packages talking about the new generation of WWF stars. And
Oh,
they,
this was still when it was WWF?
yeah, WWE, the name change happened in 2002.
Oh, damn. I
Mm-hmm.
always forget it. I always forget it was like that late.
Yeah. And so it didn't really work. I'm not going to go deep into the new generation because we're not watching a show from the new generation, but we will. Once I'm ready to start watching like bad wrestling shows with you, we're going to do the
Yeah.
new generation. Point, but the point,
I'm so ready.
but the
Anyway,
point is, business is bad right now, and it gets
yeah.
worse when with the kind of a resurgence of World Championship Wrestling. Now, World Championship Wrestling is a rebranding of Jim Crockett Promotions, which was kind of the biggest rival to WWE throughout the 80s, as it was basically the one of the few regional wrestling companies that didn't go under when Vince McMahon was expanding nationwide. And it was kind of the home of the National Wrestling Alliance. We talked a little bit about that before.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, the NWA was kind of like where all the regional wrestling companies agreed to work together to make sure that no one impeded on each other's territories, and there would be one world's champion that went everywhere and traveled all over the country, as opposed to staying in one location. And Jim Crockett Promotions was kind of like the biggest power player in that relationship. And eventually it kind of became like the last bastion of the NWA after most of the NWA kind of fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
But in the early 90s, it was bleeding money. And so it was bought out by Ted Turner, because Ted Turner was always kind of a bit of a wrestling aficionado, and at the very least, he always appreciated the fact that when the TBS Superstation first aired, wrestling was a big ratings get for that television for that network. So he's always had a little bit of an appreciation for wrestling in that way, and it leads to one of the most hilarious historical quotes in wrestling history. They always tell this story, and who knows how apocryphal it is. I believe I'm saying that word correctly. It is
Apocryphal, yeah.
Apocryphal. It is or not. But WWE always loves to tell this story of Ted Turner calling up Vince McMahon when he bought WCW and going, "Vince, guess what? I'm in the wrestling business." And Vince responds, and Vince. No, you haven't got to the best. We haven't got to the best part yet, David.
Sorry.
No, this gets better. Vince's response to this, dead face, goes, well, that's great, Ted, but we're in the entertainment business.
I feel like you've told me about this before, but it's still really funny.
I have, but this is just a great time to remind everybody of this absolutely hilarious story. But anyway, WCW was kind of a shit show of a company under Ted Turner's watch. Basically, he didn't really do much with it. He basically just existed to pump money into it and let them do whatever they want. But it was kind of a revolving door of like old school wrestling guys trying to run it, but having friction with Turner, the parent company Turner, or a Turner executive gets in there, but he doesn't understand how the fuck to run a wrestling company, so everyone hates him there. It's just a continual, it's either one or the other. Until you get to Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was at the time worked in marketing at Turner, but he had experience working in wrestling in the 80s. So he was able to kind of play both worlds, and that's why ultimately he was the longest running kind of operator of WCW and the most successful. Fair. And he his big thing was he was going to make WCW a national product as opposed to he's kind of get rid of the stink as if he would call it of Southern wrestling that the WCW and the NWA had always had. There's a real interesting divide between like Vince McMahon's WWF and old school Southern wrestling. There's a real interesting culture divide there that we're not really going to get into today.
No.
But basically, Eric Bischoff wanted to appeal to more than the Deep South, and in his mind, the way we're going to do that is we're going to get all the biggest stars from the WW from that you can buy that money can buy. First and foremost, with Hulk Hogan, he signed Hulk Hogan in 1994 after Hogan's movie career was started.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a big coup of a moment. You know, the face of the WWF for a decade is now going to WWF's chief rival.
Fair enough.
It was a big moment, and it kind of pissed off a lot of the homegrown Deep South fans of the WCW because they kind of didn't like Hulk Hogan's brand of wrestling. They like their own brand. Thank you. Get this Hulk Hogan out of my wrestling.
Can we have a Southern wrestling? We have Southern wrestling at home. Southern wrestling at home. Hulk Hogan.
It's like no, but the numbers. It's kind of hard to argue with the numbers because even if the hardcore fans of WCW complained about it, it did a lot for business. A lot of people started to buy into WCW after Hulk Hogan came on board. And he would end up buying out. He would also end up signing Macho Man Randy Savage and a bunch of other like 80s guys who were still kind of popular, but Vince McMahon was confident were too old for this anymore.
Yeah, fair.
And he had a great success of getting all these 80s wrestlers kind of under 80s WWF guys under his roof. And in 1995, Eric Bischoff has the bright idea to, all right, you know what we need to do? We need to have our own primetime live wrestling show like Monday Night Raw for WWF. And then he asked Turner, give me a time slot right at the same time as WWF. We're going to compete directly.
Shit.
So in 1995, so in September 1995, we get the start of what is known as the Monday Night War, where it's a constant ratings war between the WWF Monday Night Raw on the USA Network and WCW Monday Nitro on TNT. And so it kind of goes back and forth in a lot of ways until 1996 is where a bunch of stuff happens. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be the end of the major history lesson for what happens in 96. Mm-hmm. And in order of what happens, first, the curtain call incident happens. Mm-hmm. To explain that a little bit more for the viewers at home, I've told David about this before, is Kurt is at the time Kevin Nash and Scott Hall wrestling in WWF as Diesel and Razor Ramon, respectively. They were looking to get out of their contracts were running up in the WWF, and WCW was offering them big money contracts to come over to their show. And in fact, a little bit interesting note is this time period for professional wrestling was kind of where it was born, the idea of guaranteed contracts, salaried contracts, where you get paid X amount of money regardless of how much you work in a given year. Whereas previous to this, it was very much it was a pay as you work kind of thing. Specifically if you're hurt or if you want time off or anything, like, well, guess who's not getting paid today? Yeah, no, it's kind of a shitty, not a great worker condition. Hurrah for worker compensation in this period of time.
I mean, from what you've told me, pretends to be shocked.
Mm-hmm. No, but WCW, because they had Ted Turner's infinite supplies of money, infinite bags of money to throw around, they're like, sure, we'll pay you twice as much as WWF is paying, and we'll also guarantee that money. So you could work 2 shows in a year and you'll still get paid. And eventually WWF, once they started having better finances, because at this point in time, they didn't have a lot of money. They actually almost went out of business at around this point in time.
Yeah.
But when their financials got better, they would end up following suit with the idea of like, okay, you get a X amount of money guaranteed, and
Hmm.
that's the way it's stayed ever since.
Oh,
But
okay.
anyway, so Nash
Nice.
and Hall agreed to leave. And so WWE is like, all right, well, here's your, and then one of their last dates of the company, I believe their last date actually was in the show in Madison Square Garden, where after the show ended, there was a moment in the ring where Kevin Nash and Scott Hall hugged it out with two wrestlers under the name of Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, or Triple H. And the reason for that is because they were all close friends, and backstage, which is a whole discussion to have about that. But point being is that they're close friends and they all kind of want to say goodbye to each other, so they all have a big group hug in the middle of the ring. The problem, as far as anyone who cares about this would be concerned, is that Hall and Nash is between Hall, Nash, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. Two of them were baby faces and two of them were heels, and none of them had much of a on-screen relationship with each other. So
Hmm.
for this to have happened was kind of a big breach of kayfabe. And then it also photographs and some basic camcorder footage from the event leaked out after the show, and so everyone knew about it happening, and it caused a big kerfuffle backstage because
Hmm.
it was the traditionalists in the industry and in WWF are like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
No, this is a no go. And the reason they decided they would do this is because they kind of had the opinion that WWF can't do anything because Nash and Hall are leaving. And at the time, Shawn
Hmm.
Michaels was the WWF champion. So you're not going to punish him.
Hmm.
He's your top star right now. What are you going to do to him, right? So
Yeah.
they did it all to Triple H. He kind of had to bear all the punishment for this, and kind of had to be made to look like an asshole and really have to kind of pay his dues, or so to speak. He had to really work his
Oh.
way back up. He really had to work his way back up in terms of how management looked at him.
Oof.
The reason why that's significant is because, as the rumor goes, he was rumored to win the 1996 King of the Ring tournament. That was a then annual tournament that WWF did, where it's what it sounds like. It's just a
Hmm.
single elimination tournament, and the winner would get to have a coronation and give a big speech and all that. And it was supposed to be kind of a symbol of, like, at the time, it was supposed to be kind of a symbol of like the company is saying they really like you, that this is a
Yeah.
future star to watch out for. But Triple H got stripped of that honor. They changed the booking. Instead, this is the second, we'll get to the second thing. They instead gave the booking to a wrestler named Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm not going to really go into the particulars of his history, just to know that at this time he's kind of he's kind of starting to develop a bit of a rebellious kind of character. He's kind of being a more take no shits, kick ass on anybody who gets in my way kind of a character, a very kind of edgy late 90s anti-hero that people like. But he's still in the early stages of kind of figuring that out. And the King of the Ring tournament, and him winning the King of the Ring is kind of a famous moment in that development of that character for his speech he gives after he wins. In the finals, he beats a wrestler called Jake the Snake Roberts, who was at the time playing a character of a born again Christian. And
Oh, wait. Have you mentioned this guy to me before?
I probably have, but not in this particular context.
Because I remember something about like a born again Christian sort of guy or something like that.
I don't remember what I would have told you about him. But
Yeah.
basically, he's a born again Christian, and Stone Cold wins. And as Steve Austin goes to accept his crown, he gets on the microphone and he's like, "Get that piece of trash out of here! Get him out of here!" And then he
Oh.
proceeds to go
Ooh.
on a rant where he's like, "You talk about your Bible, look, that didn't get you your faith. That didn't get you nowhere." And then his famous line, "You talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says I just whooped your ass." And that would kind of be his they would make a shirt out of that says Austin 316, and that would be sell like gangbusters.
Why do I feel like you have that shirt?
I don't, but kind of be nice to have. But it's an absolutely iconic moment, and it's kind of been like retroactively the birth of. That's one of the first moments that was considered like could be the birth of the Attitude Era. Was that that night in that promo? I think it's a little too early, but not important really to say. And it did a lot of great sales, and it's kind of retroactively the birth of Stone Cold Steve Austin and his ascent to the top of the being the top guy in the company. That's a little bit revisionist history because WWE didn't immediately capitalize on that.
Yeah.
What they immediately capitalized, they capitalized on him more later in 96 and early 1997, where he has a major feud with Bret Hart over the WWF Championship. And we'll talk more about Bret Hart when we get to today's episode. I seem to have lost David for a minute there.
Hey,
you back?
I went downstairs and my Wi-Fi just yeeted itself.
Rip. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm back.
Basically, Stone
Cold,
baby. Yeah, Stone Cold. About give it eight more months or so. Give it.
Okay, so fair enough.
So there's the two moments of 96. The third moment of 96 worth talking about is when Hall and Nash go to WCW. They premiere on Monday Nitro, but they kind of do this kind of revolutionary for its time kind of character where they come out and they play their WWF characters, or at least some version of them, not enough to not technically be copyright infringement.
Yeah.
And they give off this impression as if they are an invading force in WCW. Ooh. They are the outsiders, and they paint this. And WCW paints this story as if these two guys are still with the WWF, and they're like invading WCW.
Ooh, I like.
It's a very cool story and absolutely revolutionary for its time. And then,
I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but where it really goes hard is Bash at the Beach 1996 was one of WCW's pay-per-view shows, and there's a tag match between three of WCW's best guys and the Outsiders plus the Third Man. They were for weeks talking about how they got a third guy in the fold. They got a third man coming, and together they're going to wreak havoc. So at the time of the show, when it comes time for the match, the third guy doesn't show immediately. So they just kind of have a 2-on-3 match. And eventually, when everybody's down and out, and it looks like WCW might lose, suddenly Hulk Hogan shows up.
Oh,
and everybody, and the commentators at least are like, oh my God, Hulk Hogan is here to save WCW one more time. And then he attacks all three WCW wrestlers. Hulk Hogan is revealed to be the Third Man.
Oh, no. Well, see, that's what I would say. See, that's what I was assuming from the get-go, is that Hulk Hogan was going to be the Third Man.
I mean, it's a little obvious in retrospect, but
yeah,
at the time, it was a big shock moment because it was the first time Hulk Hogan has been a heel in at least a decade.
Yeah.
So him doing a heel turn is absolutely is kind of like, what? And he he cuts a promo after the match as the fans are hurling garbage in the ring. A classic of this era, by the way. When they really hate somebody, they're throwing trash in the ring. He cuts a promo and he says,
I'm the trash man.
I'm the trash man. Eat trash. But he talks about how they're the new world order of professional wrestling, brother. And thus is born the NWO, the New World Order. And they would eventually grow and get bigger, and that's a whole other topic of discussion. But point is, WCW, the NWO was one of the most popular, if not the most popular storyline. There's really only one that could become close. A storyline in this entire era of time. Like, WCW started blowing WWF out of the water the night the NWO started. Fans could not get enough watching the week-to-week exploits. Like, what's the NWO going to do this week? Who in WCW is going to be able to stand up to these outsiders trying to destroy their company? It was genuinely enthralling television, if a little bit long overall. But we're not going to talk anymore about the NWO because we're not watching WCW.
Yeah.
The only reason to bring it up is to understand that right now WCW is kicking WWF's ass. And Vince McMahon is desperate to come up to freshen up his product and save his company.
Yeah.
And so this bleeds into 1997, where WWF is starting to do they have a new head writer whose name is Vince Russo, who is a very controversial figure, which we'll not explain why right now. But he has this idea that WWE needs to kind of be more contemporary. In the new generation, they're still doing a lot of the cartoony Saturday morning stuff they were doing at the peak of Hulkamania, but without any of the big name stars that kind of made it work.
Yeah.
And the fans are getting tired of it. They need something contemporary. They need something fresh. They need something modern. They need to embrace kind of the edgy counterculture of that time period. We're talking the Jerry Springer Show. We're talking Howard Stern. We're talking South Park. This is the kind of stuff,
the everything edgy and extreme sort of vibe
that came in the late 90s. And right. And he was like, that's the kind of stuff WWF needs to be doing. And he would become head writer because Vince McMahon was really into his sales pitch and was kind of desperate for anything to work. And it did work incredibly. I will have positive things to say about Vince Russo's writing. I will have plenty of negative things to say too, because I'm a pretty firm believer that even though Vince Russo was very successful for this time period, it's very dated in its own time period and pretty much couldn't have worked any other time but 1997, 1998. But credit where credit's due. And there's a lot of it that doesn't age well, but credit where credit's due. The stuff that does work really well still holds up and is pretty awesome. And it's really easy to understand why slowly but surely WWE was able to get their footing back. And in 1997, they're still kind of...
So what I'm hearing is that still kind of...
what was that?
No, I was just saying, like, you talking about all the stuff that's like that's gonna hold up, that holds up really well. That's like still really good. And so I'm just saying, like, so what I'm hearing is I'm gonna have plenty of stuff for really dorky analysis fodder.
I think so. Yes. So kind of moving now into 1997 and specifically September 22nd, 1997, emanating from Madison Square Garden. Coincidentally enough, we talked about MSG earlier. And the reason I picked this show is because as a starting point for the Attitude Era is because it's the starting point of a particular storyline in the Attitude Era that kind of defines that period. You'll see when we get there. But time for a little bit more of a lay of the land. I was going to say that 1997, WWF is still struggling financially, better than they were a couple of years ago, but still not doing great. But the quality of their television is way up from what it was only a couple years ago. Like, things are clicking. Fans are getting more engaged with it. And pretty soon they will start get that uptick. But it's the kind of thing where, like, it takes a while for good wrestling to pay off, and it takes a while for bad wrestling to make you pay.
Yeah.
And so right now it's not paid off yet, but it will.
Mm-hmm.
So the lay of the land. We are about 2 weeks away. We are 2 weeks removed. For context, I watched the last pay-per-view from before this show, Ground Zero in your house, and the 2 episodes of Monday Night Raw before the one we're watching right now. We're 2 weeks away from the next pay-per-view, which was called Bad Blood. And so I'm going to give a quick summary of where everything is right now. So to start, I suppose we should start with kind of the big name player, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's kind of on the rise in the company. But he's not at the world championship level yet. Right now, he's kind of in the middle of a storyline that was really ingenious. It was where basically at SummerSlam 1997, he was in an Intercontinental Championship match with Owen Hart. And
Yeah.
Owen Hart accidentally broke Stone Cold's neck and legitimately kind of almost paralyzed him that night.
Fuck.
But Stone Cold did fortunately survived and was able to continue wrestling for a few years after that. But at the time, he's indisposed. He's not medically cleared to be a wrestler. So this causes him to have to vacate his Intercontinental Championship as well as he was one half of the tag team champions at the time.
Yeah.
But what's ingenious is what they do is they keep Stone Cold on TV as opposed to having him be off as what would be traditional was instead of having him be like sitting at home, recuperating, whatever, they have him still be an active presence on weekly television. And how they use them is basically he can still do his signature maneuver, the Stone Cold Stunner. And so they just have him running roughshod on everybody. And I do mean everybody. The play-by-play announcer, stunner. Kayfabe commissioner, stunner. Any wrestler that tries to tell him what's what, stunner. It was kind of a never-ending adventure of like, who is Stone Cold going to kick? Whose ass is Stone Cold going to kick this week? Who's going to kick ass, flip him the bird, and walk out.
Oh my god.
And that did a lot to keep Stone Cold popular and make him more popular, even though he's injured. He can't wrestle right now. And
it's God, I'm trying to think of what it's kind of akin to in you know, television of like the side character. It's like it's the side character that just like does crazy shit and just gets everybody loving them for it.
Mm-hmm. And at this point in time, he's running afoul of the WWF officials who are like trying to maintain order on their wrestling show. Thank you very much. And instead, the audience is absolutely loving the chaos incarnate that is currently Stone Cold Steve Austin. So the two major, let's call them the two major like headlining main event storylines right now is let's start with the one that's better. Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. So Shawn Michaels, I've mentioned him by name, but haven't really mentioned what his character is. He's contextually, he's kind of just a super athletic, cocky wrestler. Subtextually, he's a little bit of a male stripper. If you see him, you'll know.
Oh.
But he's the heart.
Is this the guy they did kind of like the is this the guy they did kind of like the like heelish gay subtext with, or was that someone else?
No, that's someone else, which is on this show, and we'll talk about it. But at this point in time,
okay, nice.
But at this point in time, Shawn Michaels is the Heartbreak Kid, the sexy boy. And he's kind of a top. But also he's also a bit of a huge coke fiend, and that's at this point in time kind of getting in the way a little bit. And so there's a lot of uncomfortable tension between Shawn and some of the other wrestlers because they know what an asshole he is backstage and having to deal with him. And it's bleeding onto the on-screen character. But it's working, too, because the fans are eating up this asshole dickhead.
Yeah.
And he's now got his new friends, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, on screen now, and Chyna, who is a female bodybuilder who was brought in to be Triple H's muscle. And they're together in the early stages of what of a group would become D-Generation X, which was basically they would go around cracking edgy jokes at each other and pointing at their dicks and telling everybody that doesn't like them to suck it and doing crotch chops. Doesn't necessarily age great, but they were very committed to the bit and everybody loved it. So can't say too much, I suppose. So right now they're running afoul of The Undertaker, who is, it's very complicated. He started in 1991 as an undead mortician.
Wait. The Undertaker. The Undertaker popped up this early?
Yeah, Undertaker debuted in 1991.
Damn.
Oh, my bad, 1990. Had that 1 year off.
Damn.
Yeah, no, he's been around.
He was like an early 2000s Deuterino.
No, he is a holdover from the Saturday morning cartoon era, but he was so committed to the bit and so badass, he kind of stayed even after they stopped doing that.
Fair enough.
Kind of grandfathered him into that. It's like, it's fine. You're cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else from that time is. But anyway, he's an undead zombie wizard guy. It kind of depends on the era, how hard we're going to lean into that and how hard we're going to make him seem like a normal dude who just uses theatrics to fuck with people. But right about now, he's kind of serious and basically, The Undertaker was the WWF champion at SummerSlam 1997 in a match against Bret Hart, where Shawn Michaels was the special guest referee. Shawn Michaels tried to hit Bret Hart in the face with a chair because he doesn't like Bret Hart. Bret Hart ducked, and he hit Undertaker in the face instead, thus costing Undertaker the match and the championship. So now Undertaker wants his ass severely. And it's kind of a
Wait, this is all scripted, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's all scripted storyline.
Okay. Oh, okay. I wasn't. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so it's all kind of it's a quasi number one contendership thing. I don't believe it's officially like the winner of this feud will face Bret Hart for the championship, but it's kind of implied by how prominently featured it is and the fact that these are two top guys who are former WWF champions themselves. So, like, of course, they're going to go for the title again.
Mm-hmm.
And right now they're building to the very first, and it's kind of and the violence keeps escalating with these two, that it's building to the very first Hell in a Cell match, which it wasn't very well defined what that means at the time, but basically it means lock the two of them in a giant steel cage and there are no rules. Go crazy.
Fair enough.
So it's just kind of a constant back and forth ass beating with each other. Meanwhile, the other top storyline of this time that's not as good is Bret Hart. His part in this is great. He's the WWF champion, and basically he's kind of adopted a very interesting character, because he was kind of a rock to keep WWF going in the mid-90s. He was their biggest star during that period of time where they almost went out of business. And he was always loyal to the end. And the fans loved him. And fans may not have cared for that time period, but they loved Bret Hart as a kind of a morally upstanding, righteous good guy. But as
nice young man.
Yep. But as time had gone on, we're starting to get these more edgy characters, and we're seeing the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. The fans started liking Bret Hart's shtick a whole lot less, and they transitioned that into a Bret Hart heel turn and a heel run, where initially, and this is kind of the impetus for his feud with Stone Cold, is he would be like, how dare you fans? Like, what do you fans like about this guy? He's a degenerate. He's an asshole. He's not someone that deserves to represent the company, that can represent the company in a good light. That's me. And yet you've turned your backs on me, but to support him. And that was that was a great storyline itself that took place in 96 and 97. And now it's kind of transitioned to Bret Hart. He has gotten back together the Hart Foundation. You remember them from 1980, from our last few. Now he's gotten a lot of his other extended family in on this. His brother, Owen Hart, his brother-in-law, Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. I think Jim Neidhart's still there. But he's got his whole family in on this, and they're kind of playing and they are kind of transitioning to an America sucks, our country is great. Through us, because we don't like America nationalism bullshit, but Bret Hart being Bret Hart makes it work.
Yeah.
but he basically is like, America is a bunch of degenerate assholes. And they boo us. You go to the UK and Canada, they respect us. They respect the fact that we're upstanding good guys, not like you dickheads in America. And so he would get massive boos in America, and everywhere else in the world, people would cheer him because he was basically saying how much America sucked. And they're like, "Hey, you right?"
And everybody loved that.
Yeah. So right now he's in a feud with Del Wilkes, otherwise known as the Patriot. His character was that he wore a mask and loved America. The Patriot. That's it. That's it. That's the character.
Yeah.
His half of this is very boring. And
that sounds about right.
They're building to a match called a flag match between Bret Hart and his brother-in-law Davey Boy Smith and the Patriot and a guy named Vader, who's not super important. Right, to be honest. In a different video, I would be talking to you all about how amazing Big Van Vader is, but by 1997 WWF, nobody really cares, so I'm not going to either.
Oh.
He's a legend. He's great, but not right now. He's not great. And he's the fourth most important person in this story. But basically, a flag match. They'll get down the rules of this match later because they will do this match more than once. But basically, it's a match where in one corner will be a U.S. flag, and another corner will be the Canadian flag, and the team that gets their flag down from the pole first wins.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great, but that's where that's what's going on in the WWF Championship scene at the time. But don't worry, there is some interesting there's also a lot of interesting kind of threads here. One thing I will say that Vince Russo does really, really well is he loves to have interconnected, interwoven storylines where you got multiple people hating and fighting with multiple people all at the same time, and they all just kind of occasionally kind of collide. Specifically, right now, Shawn Michaels is in a minor feud with Davey Boy Smith because he was set to fight Davey Boy Smith, who was the European champion at the time. He was fighting for Davey Boy's European Championship, and in fact, 2 days before this show, on a live UK only pay-per-view, Shawn Michaels beats Davey Boy for the European Championship, which caused massive boos and trash was thrown all over London. Oh my God! Right? I got an email. And so that happens. Meanwhile, Owen Hart is in an ongoing feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin because Steve Austin, he damn sure isn't going to take too kindly to the guy who broke his neck, and in storyline isn't very apologetic about the fact that he broke his neck. Because Owen Hart's the heel at this time, so he actually wore a shirt that said Owen 316 says I just broke your neck. So Stone Cold is determined to get his pound of flesh about that, and conveniently, Owen Hart is currently in a tournament, a single elimination tournament, to crown a new Intercontinental Champion because, you can't. Stone Cold is out of commission. He had to drop the title. Yeah, so that's kind of that interwoven stuff I'm talking about with different guys fighting in different places. The last championship to mention at this point in time is the tag. They're going to do 3 mid-card storylines that are not great, but we should talk about them so you have a full picture of this period of time, and then we can move on. The tag team championships are currently being held by I did mention that also Stone Cold had to drop the tag team titles, so they crowned new champions, the Headbangers, which... I got a list of things that the Headbangers do. Let's see. Wear plaid, wear skirts, have weird face paint, stick out their tongues a lot. Things the Headbangers do not do. Headbang.
God damn it.
They're a very weird, what Vince thinks 90s punk culture looks like kind of characters.
How do you do, fellow?
No, and they're currently feuding with the Godwins. They are pig farmers. They're holdovers from the new generation. And if that doesn't sound goofy enough to you, here are their names. Henry O. Godwin and Phineas I. Godwin.
What?
The acronyms of their names are Hog and Pig.
Oh my god.
And they just introduced a new kayfabe family member, their Uncle Cletus. And this is going great. But 1997 says, you know what we need? Another wrestling pig farmer.
Fucking Cletus.
Yep, it's great, isn't it? And so the Godwins beat the Headbangers in a match, so now they're kind of like the next in line to fight for the tag team championships. All right, I guess we have to talk about this, even though I don't really want to.
Oh no!
Goldust versus Brian Pillman. Let's talk about that storyline. So, first of all, Goldust. Goldust. He debuted in the mid-90s as kind of half a living Oscar statue. He was obsessed with movies and painted himself all gold. But he was also a super aggressive homosexual. And so that's why they got the fans to boo him.
No.
But they decided to turn him babyface. And so they're like, here's what we're going to do about that. We're going to make sure that he denies being a homosexual and, in fact, has a wife and kids in a loving marriage.
Oh, this is who I thought the born-again Christian was.
Yes, this part. Goldust. So right now he's a babyface because he's totally straight and has a wife and kids. He's great. Meanwhile, you have Brian, but he still dresses the same way in the ring. He still has the somewhat effeminate outfits and the gold face paint. But because he's totally straight for reals, he can be a good guy. So he gets a fight with Brian Pillman, who his character is kind of being like the edgiest asshole you could imagine. He's the loose cannon. You never know what he's gonna do. And what that means right now is
wild card, baby.
Wild card, bitches. And right now, what that means is him creeping on Goldust's wife, Marlena. Vince Russo got real into this idea of like stealing each other's wives' storylines. You can see where the Jerry Springer stuff comes from here. Comes in about right here. The midget wrestling, which might be on this show, but I'll talk more about that in the after show if it is on here. I don't remember.
I don't like that.
No, anyway, so the first time Goldust and Brian Pillman, the first major match between Goldust and Brian Pillman was, if Brian Pillman lost, he would have to wear a dress until he won another match.
Of course.
So he lost, and for weeks, he would have to wrestle in a dress. So now, their most recent match that happened at Ground Zero was if Brian Pillman defeats Goldust, then Brian Pillman gets to take Goldust's wife and make her do whatever he wants for the next 30 days. Naturally,
what?
I know. Women as property angles, also a thing that happened a lot around this time.
Around this time?
Yes, around this time.
Okay, so, yeah. Look. I don't want to use a certain name that starts with an E this episode, if at all possible. But
yeah. Well, they weren't. Let's put it like this: they weren't gambling on her in matches. They weren't putting her services on the line in matches to be won. But of course, Brian Pillman wins, and he effectively kidnaps her. And for the last few weeks, we've gotten to see videos he sends called Brian Pillman Triple X Files 90s.
Oh no!
But also where he strongly implies that he has had sex with Marlena a lot. And I'll remind you that he won the rights to her and to have her around in a wrestling match, and she's clearly not consenting to any of this.
God damn it!
So, awesome. Not the last time that rape is a factor in a WWE storyline, but we're not getting to that any time today. And in the last week's show, we got he had Marlena come to the ring in a sexy black dress with kind of edgy 90s kind of fashion sense. It's shitty.
Yeah.
And parade her around so that Goldust can be like, oh no, my wife is being forced to dress like a 90s hooker or whatever the implication was supposed to be. So that's where that's at. All right, let's move on to something a lot more culturally sensitive, like the WWF race war.
Oh, God damn it!
I'm sorry, the gang war. My bad.
No. I just want to point out that I knew you'd warn me that 90s was a shit show, but dear God,
I was mean and opened with all the good stuff that holds up well.
I was not ready for the utter deluge of what the fuck that you're about to throw at me in this single episode.
So, WWF Gang Wars, basically an idea of like, look, we have all these wrestlers who kind of suck on their own and aren't really doing anything. What if we just threw them together and let them fight each other all the time in factions? Which I'm not actually against the idea of putting a lot of putting people in factions to give them something to do and a sense of a character direction. That's something that New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is a company I do like, does a lot. But anyway, here are the factions. You have the DOA, the Disciples of Apocalypse. They are your all white they're your all white wrestling band of bikers.
Yeah.
I don't have the bike. Let's have their names. Let's see. They are Crush, Chains, Skull, and 8 Ball. Good stuff here. They're, of course, the baby faces of this plot. Now let's move to Los Boricuas. They are the Puerto Rican. Everyone's from Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
We have Savio Vega, Miguel Perez, Jose Estrada Jr., and Jesus Castillo. No one besides Savio Vega anyone remembers now. I have lost David again. How unfortunate. I'm just going to take this time. All right, you back?
Like I said, Wi-Fi's being dodgy.
You have the Truth Commission, which was a play on the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They are a South African militant group. Their members are Kurgan the Interrogator, Recon, Sniper, and Tank. We're just killing it with the names. And now we have reached the Nation of Domination, which is an all-black group that takes a lot of influences from the Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers. By the time this group kind of got going, they were kind of established as a group. They are way more important than the other 3 groups I just mentioned here. Mainly because they had way better wrestlers in the group than the other 3 groups I just mentioned. So, cream rose on them. Yeah. But basically, when they would get involved in hefty storylines, it would be about how, like, black people are not treated fairly in the WWF and in society at large and all that stuff. Obviously, they were bad guys.
Of course. If it sounds based and epic to us now, of course they were bad guys in the 90s.
And so their leader at this time is Farouk, and his members are, and the other members of the group are D'Lo Brown, Kama Mustafa, and Rocky Maivia, who would become quickly known as The Rock. This was kind of The Rock's big breakout in the WWF because he debuted as Rocky Maivia as a tribute to his father, who was a wrestler named Rocky Johnson, and his grandfather, who was a wrestler, High Chief Peter Maivia. And he was kind of a dork, and he was a happy to be here, happy-go-lucky dork, and nobody liked him. As is famous, he did get a few chants, "Die, Rocky, die." Though I think that might have been "the Rocky, the" in German. I don't. I'm glad you got that one.
No. Oh God. Anyway.
So he kind of turns heel, starts getting cocky and interesting, and joins the Nation of Domination.
Of course.
So right now they're just kind of in a never-ending series of punching each other.
Yeah.
Because they're all just in different groups. What else are they going to do? And then there was something else. I feel like there was something else I was going to mention at this point. No, I think that's everything. I did cover the 3 storylines, the mid-card storylines. Yeah, I feel like you've already gotten a decent sense of what wrestling is going to be like in 1997. Spoiler warning, God. Very good in some places, very bad in others.
Terrible, awful, horrible, no good, very bad.
Yeah, we've been here for an hour, which I'm pretty happy with. By that, I felt like I had a lot of information I had to cover.
Yeah, that was an impressive info dump for the sheer volume of shit.
I feel like I feel sometimes I like to just like dump stuff on you and let you react in real time, but I felt like I shouldn't do that this time because this is where
I appreciate that because I feel like if it were like back half of this was just gonna be me kind of reeling.
No, you needed to be prepared for Goldust Marlene, the Goldust Marlene film and stuff, and you need to be prepared for Gang Wars, I think.
I really need to be prepared for Gang Wars, dude. I wouldn't survive. I'm barely gonna survive Gang Wars as is. I would not have survived it without any forewarning. I would have just like keeled over on the spot.
But yeah, that covers all the major stuff going on in the WWF right now. But now we're an hour deep, which means we're going to go we're going to go watch the show September 22nd, 1997, Monday Night Raw, emanating from Madison Square Garden. We're not watching wrestling. We're not watching WCW this week.
My apologies.
And we will see you guys in part 2. Honestly, I'm gonna open with I do not watch any of the episodes before we do because I want to have the same kind of reactions unless I've seen it before, which for this episode I hadn't. I was expecting a little more to actually happen.
Yeah, I was kind of noticing the same thing. Like I didn't really want to say anything like in the throes of it, but like. Yeah, that felt like a whole lot of nothing in a way.
It felt very much like a holding pattern episode, which was a little disappointing. But
it was. I mean, it had its moments, but like nothing felt momentous at all.
And I really did figure it was going to be fine because it's a Madison Square Garden show. Usually, kind of go all out with those, but. Which they did a few times.
They built it up, like they built up that like this is a proud tradition, a grand but it was just kind of there. There was nothing like really wild going on.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that the episodes that I watched before this one were better, but they were certainly more momentous. There was a lot more going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say this. That was a whole lot of 90s.
That's definitely true.
Yeah,
everything from the aesthetic to a lot of the characters and their appearances, very 90s.
It was I mean, I think that's the thing to really talk about with this right now is it feels so different from the 80s. It feels that golden age vibe is gone, and
Mm-hmm.
we are in this kind of limbo period of it's still kind of corny and still weirdly self-serious for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um in a way that, like, while obviously contemporary stuff is self-serious, it's there is this uh, it feels a little more backed up somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, and maybe this is again just because it was a big kind of filler feeling episode, um, but it's this very grim, dark self seriousness that's just still backed up by ultimately utter irreverence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point to it. It's kind of it is all pretty serious, but it's also ridiculous and kind of and still as
Yeah,
silly as it's ever been, just silly in a less kid friendly way.
it feels like it's in total limbo right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because so like off the bat, I noticed a much darker color palette across the board.
Mm-hmm.
The lighting was a lot more stark. It wasn't like the kind of bright, oversaturated vibe of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with all of the bright neon colors and all like the
I
backdrops
think
and
everybody wore black,
yeah, a
some
lot of
amount of
black. It was
black.
a lot of dark colors. Lot of kind of stark contrast lighting. Um, a lot more kind of technical flair toward the. I'm not sure how to put it because ostentatious is a better way to describe the 80s, but like a like technical penchant um toward more straight flash rather than glitz,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Um, it the other thing too is like it was this very interesting thing of we have all of these people that existed in the golden age era that now have to find their place in the new era,
Mm-hmm.
um among all the people who currently are around and were created specifically for the new era.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it creates this really weird feeling of stuff, like, again, like I noted how, like, announcers are not wearing tuxes anymore. They're in like leather jackets, or in Lawler's case, whatever the fuck that was. Um,
That's his like regal king attire that he wears
yeah,
everywhere.
some like music man on drugs looking get
Mm-hmm.
up with no shirt underneath and a
Mm-hmm.
crown sometimes. um, just perfectly goes along with what an ass he is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, and you have like
Neither of us were
Undertaker.
very impressed by Jerry Lawler.
Yeah, no, I said to Austin, like, this is my catchphrase. I think for '90s era episodes is gonna be "Shut up, Lawler."
Mm-hmm.
I
I feel like we're the wrong age and generation to really like Lawler in any particular way.
I will say though, I already have dollar signs spinning in my eyes. You were talking earlier about the Austin 316 shirts, and
Mm-hmm.
now, like, have God willing, this podcast gets big enough. One of the first pieces of merch I think I'll want to put out is a "Shut Up, Lawler" shirt.
I love it. But yeah,
Yeah,
Lawler is just especially when it comes to the women, he's extremely crass,
God,
and
I
it fit the time, and a lot of people watching that really liked it because they also felt the same way that he did about it. But as someone who isn't particularly appreciative of like sex women being sexual objects for the
as
sake of it
people
is
who respect women,
that too. I was going on as like I also have also come at from an era where right before I came in right before women's wrestling started being important, and I've never really been a fan during a period when it was really, really unimportant.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to get into that late '90s vibe of like, yeah, man, all of these hot women. I'm gonna fucking go on my dial-up computer and download whatever pictures I can find and jerk off, which was a real
Oh
reality of that time period.
no.
I'm pretty
I don't
sure
want to
you will
think about
find that
that.
Sable, who we got to see in a goofy ass laser tag commercial on this episode, was like one of the most downloaded women of the late '90s because
No.
was wanting to perv out to her. So it's very hard to get into that same vibe. And if you're not in it, then Jerry Lawler is just a creepy asshole.
Oh, it hurts so much. Oh God. Okay. Um. So yeah. So we have stuff like that. We have Vince McMahon, who's slowly being brought to prominence by the writing team.
Yeah.
Um. We have. Honestly, the one of the biggest shifts to me was the Heart were the Heart Boys. Um.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically because when we watched the '80s episode, the Heart tag team almost felt like this. Again, we were talking about the Saturday morning cartoon vibes. They felt like this conniving duo of villainous sidekicks, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
these I'm evil
I'm
mischief
going to
makers.
win.
Yeah, yeah,
Aha.
kind of impish, kind of oafish, kind of
Mhm.
just big
They're
dumb.
the guys that like the good guys beat up, so they don't
Yeah,
have to beat up the bad guy, the big bad guy.
but now Heart Foundation as in this era is like a complete heel turn where it's they still have like that little bit of pink, but it's the '90s now, so they're in mostly black, and the pink are just accents, and they're
And
in
they have
leather.
these leather jackets.
And Brett, for some reason, is a face, which just feels weird.
Well, no, he's a heel. He's just a very understandable heel because
Okay,
his heel gimmick is America sucks because they're a bunch of degenerate assholes. And
yeah,
it's like, well, you make a good point.
yeah. We sympathize with you, Brett.
Yeah.
Um, oh Canada.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
it yeah, but either way, it's just it feels so bizarre. um, like that really stuck out to me was just like the transformation. I think the transformation of the Heart Foundation specifically is so indicative of
Mhm.
that kind of tone shift, right? Um, where even if the silliness came from just kind of more implicit vibes to
Mhm.
to uh to a wrestler's persona, it just
Mhm.
does a complete 180, and they're big and dark and scary now, and not
Mhm.
like you know yeah.
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 Yeah, and honestly, I will say that as much as this episode was a little disappointing to watch, I will say that like I think the biggest takeaway I wanted for this episode was to show that tonal shift,
Hmm. And I think
and
I think
I
you
think
I
we
think you
did
picked
get
a very
that.
good episode for that.
I think we did accomplish that.
You picked a phenomenal episode for that. I just wish
Mhm.
there were more going on.
No,
Um,
there's not as much interesting stuff to talk about as we've had
this
before.
what although I do kind of appreciate this as my introduction to the '90s,
Mhm.
partially because of that tone shift thing, and partially because like this felt like an introduction of the Rogues Gallery, like a parade of the Rogues Gallery of the '90s,
Mhm.
if you will,
Yeah, it did.
um, for a multitude of reasons. Um,
Good and bad.
Whether
You get
yeah,
a lot of the good and a lot of the bad.
well, it's interesting too because you were telling me about all these like interconnecting storylines and all of this crazy heavy plot stuff that we had going into this, and it was all there. It was just the very surface level of all of it.
And it didn't
Um, you
advance
know,
anywhere.
yeah, it didn't. They were just all kind of there. Like the Nation of Domination, got to have their exhibition feeling matches, and
I'm
that was
very sad that we did not get to see any more of the gang wars than just
I'm
the
I am
nation.
I'm
Because
very very
I
happy.
built up those stupid assholes, and
I
then
am
none of
so
them are
happy
there.
that I got to have like a tasting plate of the race war, gang war, whatever. Um, before whatever I have to endure when it really gets going. But it
Mhm.
was cool to see like the Nation of Domination in action, because they're like you said in the first half, they're all very clearly talented wrestlers. They are all great on their feet. They're all beautiful at doing work.
Mhm.
Um, they're all strong as hell and nimble,
Mhm.
and just generally really clearly talented athletes, and it was
Like
cool to watch them shine.
there's a reason. Well, there's two reasons, but one of the reasons
Yeah.
why, like once they kind of they once the gang wars thing fades out and they move on to other stuff, the nation survive. The nation continues on as a group for a while longer after that. And
Oh yeah.
one of the reasons is that they're way better than most of the other groups.
Well, yeah, they like I spent a lot of last week kind of kind of like fanboying over technique, so I don't want to like
Mhm.
hyper fixate on that as much this week. But all this to say, like, it was cool to see them. It was
Mhm.
cool to watch them work and really show off. But we just like got no storyline beats for them. Like
Yeah.
Rock, the Rock didn't get to cut a promo. None of them really got to cut a promo. Um, by the way, I feel so proud of myself for like I'm starting to use technical terms now.
Yeah.
It's great.
Also, I'm surprised. I am surprised by the lack of promos from like the mid card people because I've had to deal with
Yeah.
that week. I had to deal with that on a regular basis the last two episodes. I had to listen to a promo from the fucking Truth Commission. Why that like on the list of the people who of the groups that people least care about from the gang wars, the Truth Commission is at the bottom. It's the absolute bottom of that. And like I have to, and I had to listen to them talk, but this time, no, only the important characters get to talk this time.
And by the important characters, we mean uh, Bret Hart, uh, Shawn Michaels,
Steve
uh,
Stone Cold and the Undertaker, I think, are it.
yeah, kind of Undertaker, and
Undertaker does
Stone
his
Cold.
shtick, and Brian
Yeah,
Pillman has a thing before his match, but
yeah. Which the Brian Tillman match, oh
that
my
that
god,
was interesting.
that was so it was like such a bizarre beast, because my camera for like for some reason my side of the stream froze, um and it froze like sometime in between when it started off as like a friendly match of two guys dicking around and when it got serious.
Yeah, okay.
um
I don't know. They showed it happened in lot on the lot on live. It happened during the commercial break, but basically what happened was Marlena accidentally or otherwise hit Owen Hart in the head with her purse. And so suddenly Owen's like, "Hey, what the fuck, man? Why is she hitting me? Why is she
yeah,
interfering? This is a fuck around and not really try match. What is she doing?"
yeah, yeah.
And that was the reason for why
Okay,
the second half of the match was more like an actual
that's a
fight.
that's a weird thing to have happen off screen.
Yeah, no, it's a super important plot beat, but to the whole segment. But nah, we're gonna do that during the commercial break.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about kind of like the editing and pacing I've noticed in past episodes, and this was a really interesting beast in that I don't know what to make of like the editing and pacing here. It was all just kind of like it wasn't like super fast paced. It wasn't super slow paced. It wasn't like frenetic and stressy like I found the '80s to be. Um, it was just kind of there, going at whatever damn speed it felt like in the moment. Um,
Which is kind of weird in because like that the idea of like a frenetic pace is a Vince Russo hallmark
yeah,
because
but like,
he
do you get what I'm saying though? Kind of like
yeah
something about yeah.
it was kind of weirdly paced and some of the commercial breaks were very weirdly placed.
My
We
personal
made
favorite.
one thing we made fun of this is you gonna tell it.
Yep. Oh yeah. So in the oh god, remind me of their names
It
again.
was Cactus Jack and Triple H in a Falls Count Anywhere
Yeah,
match.
yeah. Cactus Jack and or Captain Jack and Triple H.
Cactus Jack, you had it
Um.
right the first time.
Oh, Cactus. I thought you were saying
Cactus,
Captain the whole
no
time.
Cactus Jack.
Okay, Cactus Jack and Triple H having a rough match, having a
Hardcore, hardcore
uh
match.
hardcore, no holds barred match. Um, and oh, I just got what no holds barred means. God,
Yeah,
I'm an
no,
idiot.
as in like
Anyway,
there are no holds that are illegal.
yeah, I just like understood what that phrase is saying
Mhm.
after 22 years of life. Why am I like this? Almost 23 years of life. Jesus, David. Anyway, um um but yeah, so Cactus Jack and Triple H, we're having a hardcore match. Um there was a point where Triple H, so it started off with Cactus Jack just yeeting a trash can onto Triple H's head that was then brought back a number of times in the fight.
Mhm.
Um, and at one point we have Triple H grabbing the trash can. He's about to slam it over Cactus Jack's head, and right before he does, like right before it makes impact, it cuts to commercial. And then it comes back from commercial, and Cactus Jack has a or Triple H has a broom that he's yeeting over Cactus Jack's back in a very unsafe manner. I just want to once again add,
Mhm.
like you're hitting the spine there, buddy. That's not okay.
That's very painful.
Um, that's it's very painful, very dangerous. But then a few seconds after the mop hit, we cut back to the what where we were before commercial, and yep, the
He hit
trash
him.
can the trash can connects. Like it was just the dumbest thing to cut on. Like
Like,
why?
why did
And
you
then it
not?
cut back to it.
Why did you not show the impact and then cut?
Yeah, yeah, and like if you don't want to show the impact just because like it's a fun like audience expectation subversion, sure. But then it cut back to it like it's some sort of cliffhanger. Like, oh no, the trash can that was like an inch above his head before we cut. I wonder if it made contact.
And then it did.
Yeah, what cool. Thanks, guys.
Which that was one of the few super interesting things that actually happened on this episode.
That was a really cool fight.
Yeah,
I do agree. That was a
our
really
first
good fight.
foray into like real hardcore wrestling.
Hmm. And yeah, it looks. Something I noticed too, especially during. I can't remember if it was during this match or during the Hart match, the Bret Hart match. I mean, um, something I noticed that I haven't in any of the other things we've watched thus far. You know, the three other things we've
Mhm.
watched. Um, was I could hear them making contact with the mat. I could hear the slam of body on mat.
That was probably the hardcore match because they did a lot of on the concrete outside the ring and the ring and the ramp.
Well, it wasn't. Well, that's
ring.
the thing. It wasn't. It wasn't when they were in the ring, or it wasn't when they were out of the ring. It was when they were in the ring.
I don't know. That could be either one, but there were some loud mats.
Yeah, which I almost have to wonder if that was intentional, like if they sound designed that to happen because it's the gritty '90s now, and we want every impact to hurt more. Like because I didn't hear any of that in the '80s, I didn't hear any of that in the contemporary stuff, didn't hear any of that in Lucha Underground, which is why in episode 1 or 2 I asked you about what the mats are made of, because like I couldn't hear any impact. It felt like there must be a lot of padding there. But here, like, but then you told me they were hard, and I'm like, okay, so they're just not like my. But like here, it almost seemed like they were mic'd, like they were reverberating.
That's a thing that is done. I don't know what WWE was specifically doing at this point in time, but that's not an uncommon practice to put a mic under the ring. In fact, I don't know if I'll ever have, and I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to bring this up again. So I want to bring it up. That NBC around a couple of years from this point in time did a TV special called Pro Wrestling Exposed, that exposed pro wrestling's greatest secrets, which is an absolute trash tier show that is hilarious for how bad it is. It's basically them explaining how wrestling works, but only half of it is accurate, and they act super condescending about it the whole time. Like, they act like wrestling fans are dumb fuck stupid and don't understand that half of this is happening. Like, they're like, when they show how they fake a move, they're like, fans don't know the difference because they don't know the secrets. And they're like, dude, we we know.
We know, we can tell. On that note, I starting to pick up more and more of these moments. I pointed out to Austin when we were watching toward the end, like there was a hair pull that I just for some reason really noticed was like that's not gonna hurt
Now
as
this
much
the
as they're
super
playing off.
obvious like, "Ruh!"
Yeah, well, it wasn't even that. It was like, dude, it was like this light grab from the front, and dude was like wincing. I think it was Hart. Bret Hart was like
Because he's
wincing,
the
like
one
it
with
was
hair
like,
between the two,
yeah,
between him and Goldust.
yeah. It was like wincing, like it was some great stinging pain shooting through his body, like stuff like that. Like we know yeah. Don't do that.
Like now, if we really think about it, it's pretty easy to figure out. We just kind of we roll with it.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, there's stuff like that. But yeah, I
But
kind of
anyway,
wonder
yeah, as I
if
was
they were
saying, is
doing
it
stuff like
exposed
that.
pro wrestling secrets they talk about? Like that's
Yeah.
they talk about the mics thing, and they're
Yep.
and they like, and I was like, oh yeah, which that's one of the
Which
few things they actually got right.
which again, I have to wonder if they're doing to kind of amplify the grim dark aesthetic of the '90s.
That could be it.
Yeah. So there was that. Um. Um. I see. Like God, I don't really know what else to latch on to other than the whole Stone Cold Steve
Yeah,
Austin
I
thing.
feel like we
Oh,
have to talk about that because that was the number
okay.
one
There
reason I
there
picked this episode.
I think there are two things. Yeah, yeah, I think there are two things I really kind of want to like focus on to like kind of squeeze content out of for this.
Mhm.
Is the Stone Cold Steve Austin thing and the messy endings. Those are the two that I really want to talk about. But not even because they're like I can't like there's nothing in this for me to like really deeply latch onto to do a philosophical analysis of like aside
Mhm.
from the fact that it's the '90s now and
This is what
we're
we're doing,
more
man.
blatantly macking on we're more blatantly sexually macking on women and everything's a little more grim dark and everything's a little more extreme. Like there's not
Mhm.
much for me to analyze. At least it doesn't feel like it. But I want to talk about these two things just because they're so funny.
Yeah, so kind of like the one reason I picked this damn episode was it's kind of it's the retroactive almost start of Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon, which was the feud of the Attitude Era. Everything about this feud is everything about that is defined. That defines the Attitude Era. In many people's minds, the Attitude Era doesn't really start until their feud does, and everyone has pretty much agreed that when they stopped in 2001, that was it. Along with a few other factors, but that was a big factor in everyone being like, and the Attitude Era stops here.
Oh my god.
And
It
so
was just
I kind of picked up on like the start of this, which is if we get to talk, we'll almost certainly get to talk more about it in other episodes. But the
yeah.
part that kind of at least picks up to me, the thing I latch on to, knowing where the storyline goes anyway, is that from where it starts, Vince McMahon is a pretty reasonable figure here.
Yeah, he's coming in to play the voice of reason, and I made a comment to Austin, which I feel especially I think I especially kind of like picked up on after
Mhm.
watching Lucha Underground last week is like man, it really feels like Vince McMahon just like really wanted to have an acting career but got plopped with this like pro wrestling thing instead, um because he's pouring his heart and soul into those lines. He's not very good at delivering them, but damn
Now
if he's
he'll
not
get a,
he's not trying his
he'll
best.
get better because right now he's kind of
Well,
playing a
yeah,
role that he's not very well suited to, which is kind of this like like beleaguered middle management is because
yeah,
probably his kayfabe job at this point. But
yeah,
he's kind of like he's like stressed out and he's like trying to maintain the peace and he's just kind of would like everyone to stop causing chaos all the time.
yeah,
And Stone Cold is like, No.
No. How about I
No.
do anyway?
And Vince McMahon will eventually figure out that he's way better at being a megalomaniacal evil boss. that
It's
that
really funny because because we're talking about like all the gritty realism of the 90s era, and I can feel McMahon really leaning into it because he seems like he he it feels like he really likes trying to create this very convincing character. Like I said, he's pouring his heart and soul into those lines, whereas now in contemporary era, um he um he's just like this cartoon character, and it doesn't come across with the whole with the at least in the one episode with the few line
right,
deliveries from him I saw, it doesn't come across like he's putting the same amount of passion into that character.
but
But man, it's just so natural for him that it's just
just to be
it feels like
this bonkers asshole.
yeah, it just feels correct. It just feels like this is actually just who Vince McMahon is in real life.
And
It's
he's
the
gonna
most
like,
convincing character on all
mhm.
of WWE.
He's the realest one here.
uh, you're doing great, buddy. Like,
But like right now, but like as I was saying, is that he's the voice of reason, and
mhm.
he's the voice of order, trying to fight back against pure chaos in Stone Cold Steve Austin, who has seemingly no set moral code, more so than it's just all about I'm here to raise hell because people aren't giving me what I want.
The ultimate brat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit, but everyone loves him for it because he's kind of kick-ass, and
Hey man, he goes hard.
he does. And in this episode, Vince McMahon is portraying these very fair points of like, dude, 2 months ago you got your neck broke.
Yeah.
If you wrestle right now, you could like end your own career from getting re-injured. But Stone Cold's like, I hear you, but I don't care. I want to wrestle, and you're not letting me wrestle, so I'm gonna kick your ass.
It's like a petulant child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me what I want. You.
And and right now, Vince McMahon is the bad guy in the sense that the audience doesn't want to be told that Stone Cold can't wrestle.
The ultimate irony of Vince McMahon's character arc.
And he will become, but he will later become this insane sadistic asshole, and Stone Cold will be very blatantly the guy in the right when they decide to lean more into this, like everything, like they Stone Cold very much becomes kind of like an avatar for if everyone who has ever they use this metaphor a lot, but anyone who has ever wanted to beat up their boss sees themselves in Stone Cold.
Stone Cold. Oh God.
It's this hella Gen X energy here,
Oh
and
God. It's so that's so larpy.
and that can be interesting. And they run this story differently now, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how they did it in the '90s. But they definitely made Stone Cold out to be like everyone can live vicariously through Stone Cold beating up his boss, because you can't do that to your own. And so to play off of that,
beating up everyone, really.
yeah, at this point in time, he's beating up everybody. They will kind of calm that down and kind of frame it so it's more of Vince McMahon and his cronies, or who he specifically hits, and no one else really. But they'll lean into this evil corporate, boss who only wants what he wants, and no, we've talked about this a little bit. Of he wants what he wants, and he doesn't really care what the little people want, what the regular man wants. He wants what I want, and Stone Cold's going to be a rebel against that. But right now, they're still kind of in transition to that period.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny to see it now where it feels like obviously Vince McMahon's in the right here, dude. But
yeah,
later he will very obviously be not, because he's going to go to extreme lengths to punish Stone Cold Steve Austin over this. But this,
well, I mean, to be fair, Stone Cold did give him a seizure, supposedly. The world's most
Vince McMahon would
convincing
all, as I said,
seizure.
Vince McMahon would get plenty of practice at figuring out how to sell a Stone Cold Stunner, which is a neck breaker. Or not a neck breaker, it's like a chin breaker. Like, if I'm having to explain to you why the Stone Cold Stunner hurts, it's a kick to the gut, and then he's driving your chin into his shoulder. That's what's supposed to happen in a kayfabe explanation of why that. What Vince McMahon does is he takes the move, he kind of rolls over Steve Austin, and then just starts seizing. Or flopping around like a fish. How you would like to describe it is up to you.
I just really want to point out that the 90s are like that 90s WWF is taking itself so damn seriously, and everything's supposed to be so like extreme and gritty. But this is the hardest I've laughed out of all of our episodes so far, just losing it over the crazy shit that's going on. It's so dumb and it's so silly, and I love it.
Wrestling.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to get a hold of myself here.
No, this is great content.
I feel like every podcast has to have that episode every once in a while where just one or both of the hosts just absolutely breaks over how ridiculous the thing is, and that's the meme of the episode.
Has been, and our intro to the 90s is your
we broke David episode.
Yep. And then let's go ahead and talk about the ending, I guess, because
the messy endings. Oh my god!
I guess I will say is that as much as this episode doesn't really move plot very much, it does touch on a couple of tropes that I was hoping we'd get to see from this era of time and under Vince Russo's directive. The main one being let's end a match by everybody running out and just start fighting, and then it's just over, I guess.
Call in everybody.
Let me
for my fellow Spy Kids 3D fans.
This episode had 5 matches, one of which was a match where you could not get disqualified.
Yeah.
So there's 4 matches where you could have had the finish that I'm about to talk about. 2 of them ended that way, and the main event had that happen right after the match. And now that I think about it, that also happened right after the first match too.
Yep. It was, we had a lot of just people storming the stage out of nowhere. I always have to wonder if they took inspiration from that groundbreaking moment where by the way, this is really random. How much post do you feel like doing on these episodes? Because I have a really funny gag in mind, but I want to ask you about it first.
I don't mind. Go for it.
How would you feel about until we go back to the 80s putting a censor bleep over my use of a certain peripheral character's name every time I have to refer to her?
What are we meaning here?
Miss Elizabeth. I don't know why. I'm just so tired already of talking about her that I just want to censor her until we absolutely have to go back to the 80s and be like, oh yeah,
she's here. We've kind of now created our own phrase for absolutely absurdly frequent replays of the same moment over and over again.
Yeah, it's the Elizabeth classic. That's her finishing move.
Yeah, is endless replays.
The spirit of Miss Elizabeth. Anyway, so yeah. If you feel like going back and post and making a gag out of that, by all means. If not, completely understand. Anyway, I almost wonder if Vince Russo took some inspiration from the momentous moment of Elizabeth um pulling Hulk Hogan out on stage and just him jumping in and wailing, because it kind of has like that energy with like silly cartoon Simpsons like vibes to it, where it's just like everybody comes in and starts wailing.
Like everybody does it every single time.
Yeah, and there's no rhyme or reason. It's just like it's just they almost like materialize out of nowhere, and it's
Mhm.
so I can't help but just die of laughter when I see it, because it's so ridiculous. Just out of nowhere, the stage just explodes with people
Like suddenly there's
that
10
come
people
flying
going in the
in.
ring and they're all just throwing hands.
My personal favorite in this episode is China, because because sure, she's getting involved every time people are storming the stage, but then there was also the brutal match where
Mhm.
she flies in on Cactus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like after, like she's trying to do a thing where she tries to break up the pin by jumping on Cactus Jack before the match is over, but then she's too late. But then she's too late. So like right after Cactus Jack gets the last pin, she's just right there and
It
jumps
just
on
looks impotent as hell.
him. It's like, oh
Oh my god. It's so funny. And like again, I get what they were going for. It's really funny because it kind of it I'm reminded of the ending of Lucha Underground episode 1, where where all of a sudden these mercenaries came in out of nowhere, right? And it was this really effective moment where the tables got completely turned. And I was sitting there in kind of this actual shock, and it was this great
Mhm.
sinister moment from the commissioner. Um just kind of, again, the whole welcome to Lucha Underground, now it's like a town. But here it doesn't it doesn't serve a purpose other than just chaos.
Yeah, kinda. And that's if I had to tell you the worst thing about Vince Russo era writing in terms of like quality of writing, if we're not talking about
Yeah,
like
not
if we're
all
not
the
talking about
divisive political bullshit.
right, if we're not talking about like the content, like the appropriateness of the content, if we're talking strictly speaking, the quality of the writing in terms of
Hmm.
like structure and that kind of stuff. That's absolutely one of Vince Russo's worst aspects is he uses that all the time.
Yeah,
Every time.
which is really funny because you were talking about how cool it is, and how effective he was at intertwining all of these narratives. And I agree. I think it takes a lot of talent to do that, and to do it in a way that's accessible and comprehensible. Like
Mhm,
this being my first 90s episode and me not being great with names and all this stuff, I was
mhm.
kind of having trouble like picking up on some, but I kind of tell that like everything is interconnected, more so than it was, when I was talking about it
Right.
in 80s era or contemporary era. Like
But on this
everything
but
just
on this
feels like,
episode, the only way that it's interconnected is it just means everybody shows up to punch each other after
yeah.
matches.
Yeah, and it's really funny that that kind of tendency is born out of really good writing, but the tendency in itself is just such sloppy writing that
and
just
it's
is
and it's
so
and it's not
ridiculous.
and it's not something that happens every time. I hate that I keep coming back to the episodes I watched 2 days ago, watched 2 episodes ago, but they
Yeah,
would do more. But they do more clever stuff with it than that. For example, like one of the more older episodes I watched, you get Shawn Michaels you know doing a promo on the Undertaker, but then later, when the British Bulldog comes out for a match, Shawn Michaels will beat him with a chair, and then that's it.
yeah.
It's like
It's
you don't have this, and everyone brawls. The end, but it feels more like a focused actual character beat.
which I kind of have to wonder again. You were talking about how this was after a really big show for them in London, and you were
Yes, they
wondering if they
did
were kind of like,
a one night only. It was a Saturday night pay per view in London, and then they have Monday Night Raw at Madison Square Garden on the 2 days later.
yeah. So, and you were talking about how you're wondering if they were like hurting for crew or something, and I'm inclined to agree, and I'm wondering if the solution then to well, crap, we have this big show in MSG,
And
but like,
everyone's kind of jet lagged and we're all tired and nobody really wants to like do a lot today.
yeah. So I wonder if that that parade of the parade of the Rogues Gallery vibe. We have Doggo.
Oh,
That parade of Rogues Gallery vibe was intentional. Like, well, crap, we don't. What our MSG shows are historically these amazing momentous events, but we don't really have anything for that. So let's just kind of trot everybody out and throw them all out there and just
mhm.
let them go at it. You
Yeah,
know?
like as we mentioned, there's really only like two things in this episode that are significant plot developments in any way, which
Hmm.
is the Stone Cold Vince thing, and
Yeah.
then the Mick Foley thing, because this was the WWF debut of Cactus Jack.
Yeah.
So, and that whole thing, and kind of like a real codifying of the three faces of Foley
Yeah. Which,
thing, where Mick Foley has three separate, distinct personalities that all wrestle, and they all kind of show up semi randomly.
yeah. And it's really funny too. You mentioned that as like the two things in this episode, because there was a third thing that got a lot of airtime, which is Shawn Michael and the Undertaker, but absolutely nothing happened with it other
No,
than that big Undertaker call out fake out where he just got curb stomped for a solid minute and then everybody ran away.
like, and I'll be honest with you, how, as I keep referring back to like the last two episodes and look how they did it better. No, this is
Yeah.
actually kind of par of the course right now. Like,
Wow.
like they have the one episode, they have the first episode to set up the idea that we're going to do this in Hell in a Cell. And I think that this is the first episode that really explained what the rules of that were, which is like they're in a cage. The cage is sealed from the top, which is actually different from a normal cage match. Normally it's an
Yeah.
open top. And this is sealed from the top. The idea is that you're not leaving.
Yeah.
You're gonna stay in this cage until one of you wins. That's it. But other than
Yeah.
that, they just kind of are like talking at each other and saying kind of the same things. Like Shawn Michaels is like, hey, 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 I'm Shawn Michaels and I'm not scared of the Undertaker. I'm gonna beat you in hell. And then the
Yeah.
Undertaker, he does his goofy, I I will see your rotting corpse, Shawn Michaels, and I will send you to hell. But like
And we
nothing
keep
real.
getting these weird, dumb close-up shots, and it's the same shot of zooming in on his face, making the exact same expression every
Like,
single
listen,
time.
everybody loves the Undertaker, but he was really one note.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I've been reticent to say this all episode because I don't want you to hate me. I don't quite see the appeal right now.
Of the Undertaker,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, he's not a very nuanced or interesting character, and there's like one feud where he is, which he's about to get into that, but not right now.
Okay.
He's just kind of an interesting aesthetic and an interesting presence, and he has longevity.
Yeah.
He's been there from 1990. He still technically wrestled this year.
Wow.
So he's almost there. And I will say in his later years, we'll get this idea of the streak of it, where he was undefeated at WrestleMania for 21 consecutive matches, as it would turn out. And we only do one of those.
Yeah, I remember you. I remember you telling me about that.
Right. So like that will be a big storyline of the Undertaker.
Hmm.
But a lot of Undertaker is a lot of the way of his character presence and how kind of unique and committed unique the character is, especially by this point when we're not doing cartoons anymore. And like how committed
he looks like a cartoon.
Well, yeah, he still feels like kind of like a cartoon in an era where we're not doing that anymore, but everyone just kind of likes it anyway.
Sure.
Because of the way that he is committed to it. I totally understand. Like, it can be kind like if you're looking for more than just like a cool entrance and an interesting aesthetic, I can see how it's a
See,
little difficult
here's
to get into him. I do.
well, I can do with just a cool entrance and an interesting aesthetic. I could definitely like get on board with just that being a thing of this of just kind of a crazy character. Like I feel like that's kind of what we have going with like the Fiend, and
Mhm.
even though like I haven't seen the Fiend in action yet, I'm already super on board with the idea of him, even though it seems like he's just like a cool entrance and a very stylized aesthetic. But the Undertaker's just
Bray Wyatt's better at promos than the Undertaker is, and
but like yeah
I think that might be part of
yeah
the problem. Is that for as cool as the Undertaker has always looked, he doesn't really talk that way. Like the way he tries to portray his character, the way he talks, isn't the most interesting thing. And
yeah it just feels goofy to me.
there's kind of a reason that even in the goofy ass era of the 90s when he shows up, he has Paul Bearer. I know, great joke. But they have this guy who runs the funeral parlor where Undertaker resides, and he's the one that does all the real talking. Like he'll
Yeah.
say he's a manager for the Undertaker. He says all the real stuff, and then Undertaker will come in at the end and go, "You will rest in peace," and then he says nothing else.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a like
Yeah, what happened? What happened to Paul?
he'll come back, but they basically decided to run an angle of like they wanted to kind of give Undertaker a new direction, so they kind of have Paul Bearer turn on the Undertaker and try to manage new guys.
Ooh.
Which he's not on this episode. He'll come back soon to continue that. But
Okay.
yeah, but basically this also meant that now the Undertaker has to do all the talking himself.
Cut his own promo.
And he has to give these long-winded monologues that even for wrestling monologues are kind of goofy and trite.
He also like with his costume, he's kind of got like these Shang Tsung vibes going on.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, I don't know why. I just always imagine him with like a much different aesthetic. Where like for some reason I'm imagining like leather, like duster with with like a plague doctor hat sort of thing going
Yeah,
on.
I hate to
I don't
tell
know.
you, this is like the one era where he doesn't wear something like that.
Oh, so my mental image of him is accurate otherwise.
Like he wears a lot of like Western inspired gear because he's from Texas.
Hmm.
And so in most eras of the Undertaker, he does wear like he'll wear like a duster and he'll wear like this rimmed hat,
Hmm.
almost like not quite a cowboy hat. I don't know hats well enough to explain it.
Like I said, it's kind of like a from what I remember seeing pictures of, which is I thought I'd seen pictures of him was like a plague doctor.
You probably have. Okay. But like yeah, like he had like this current era where he's wearing this long flowing robe. This is kind of colloquially called the Lord of Darkness era Undertaker.
God, it feels like an
Especially when
alternate costume from a fighting game.
especially when especially when he starts having a cult, but that's later. But yeah, you kind of miss the one era. This is like the one era where he doesn't lean into his like West Texas roots and
Okay.
how he chooses to portray himself.
Maybe that's part of it too, because like again, he's kind of like right now looking like this Shang Tsung motherfucker, and I'm just like,
Actually, he does. This is the only he does have this. He has a few years where he kind of isn't supernatural anymore, and he's just a biker dude who loves America or whatever. But that's not.
God,
That's different. That's later.
that
In
sounds
terms of
lame
being
too.
like the dead man Undertaker, this is the one time when he's not. This is the most different look he ever has.
Well,
So that
fine.
could also play into it.
Yeah, it just everything about him felt goofy from the get go, and I really didn't want to say anything, but yeah, I don't quite get the appeal right now. Maybe I will later.
It's
I'm
fine.
keeping my mind open to the Undertaker, but for now, like, okay,
It's fine. I think if he had something more substantial or interesting to do, that might have also helped.
yeah. But instead, he's just got Shawn Michaels thrusting his crotch at him and then curb stomping him.
Shawn Michaels is happy to keep to his character. lot of that hip thrusting, cross thrusting.
a lot of peeling that shirt off very sensually.
Yeah, man. When I told you male stripper, I meant it. I'm really sad you didn't get to see him in a match where he may or may not be wearing assless chaps.
No.
This is about the right era to see that. So like he was in his non wrestling attire tonight.
Oh my god. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no no no.
But yeah, this episode ended up being a lot more of like almost an intro to the '90s and what you'd kind of expect aesthetically,
Yeah.
which isn't great because we do a whole pre-show about that.
Which like I feel like I feel like there are things I could kind of grasp at to get more of a deeper analysis from, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't but I don't feel like I have enough material to be able to do that in earnest with any of this stuff. Like you mentioned a whole lot of the tropes and stuff and a whole lot of like little details and a whole lot of this and that. But it feels right now like there's not much more to for me to observe about it other than just kind of shrugging my shoulders and being like fucking 90s man, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I point out that like half the stuff I've talked about at this point is references to stuff that has already happened or stuff that will happen.
Yeah, again, it's the ultimate filler episode.
Like
They pulled off filler
I'm
in
not
Madison
talking.
Square
Yeah,
Garden.
yeah, like I'm not talking a lot about what actually happens in the episode.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like last week when we had like distinct things to talk about for each
Mm-hmm.
match of Lucha Underground. This is just kind of like a puddle.
Mm-hmm.
It was an interesting puddle. It was often a very a visually engaging puddle, but it was just kind of a puddle.
Yeah, and even if we were taking this as a like stuff to talk about, there's a lot of stuff from this time period we didn't get to see. Like as I mentioned,
Yeah.
the gang wars thing was very much on the back burner. None of the other
Mhm.
groups showed up. We didn't get to talk about minis wrestling, which is something that I mentioned on the first half, but I wasn't sure that it would show up, so I didn't really talk about it.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't get to see any of the light heavyweight division, which WWF didn't give a shit about that anyway, but I could have at least talked about like why they did it and why they didn't care, but
Yeah.
that wasn't there. The only prominent Sunny was on the show, but at this point she's kind of been relegated to just kind of announcing a match every once in a while.
Yep.
So we don't really get to talk a lot about how women were portrayed because
Other
you
than
get
fucking
Marlena.
Waller just perving
Yeah.
on every single thing that crosses the stage with boobs on it.
Yeah, pretty much. But like, there's not a women's division yet, and Sable was just in the commercial. So like,
Yeah.
there's not really anything interesting to talk about in terms of like how the women were used. I mean, I guess you could talk about Marlena, who is even in less clothes than she was last week. Great.
Sure. Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of fetish gear there.
Yep. And as I told David during the show, we're gonna get even more fetishy with Goldust stuff.
I mean, we ain't here to kink shame, fam. We're just, it in this case feels kind of yucky considering the broader story implications.
Right, there are broader
What's
story
going on?
implications of like she is being held by
This
Brian
is
Pillman
very
against her will,
non-consensual,
and he's having a lot of sex with her.
and she's totally into it. Wink, wink.
Except she's definitely not.
Yeah, every time they cut to her, she just looks horrified and disgusted.
Yep, which is great acting on her part, but also gross. Please, can we?
Yeah, I almost have to wonder how much of that is acting.
But okay, I am going to say that I guess this is as good a time as I'm going to get to kind of talk about, we talk about content in wrestling and what is and isn't appropriate. And kind of how it kind of works a little bit differently, I think, in wrestling. Is this time to get on a soapbox a little bit here? I think that a lot of it's pretty much like everybody kind of agrees this whole thing is storyline is gross. Anyone who talks about it is like, this is gross and bad. But you could easily make an argument of an argument of at least like if this happened on another TV show, you'd
Hey,
still probably think it's icky, but not as much, or at least you'd more easily be like, this is just fictional. These are
yeah.
characters. And I want to talk a little, get on my soapbox a little bit of why that's a little bit different in wrestling.
Mhm.
And the reason I think it's a little bit different in wrestling is because in wrestling, there's a lot less of a clear divide between real human being and the character you're playing.
Mhm.
That's been the way it goes in wrestling forever. That was
Yeah.
intentional. They the old time the traditions of wrestling believed that this is the only way you're going to be able to really keep people watching the show is if you trick them into believing that it's fake, that it's real, excuse me.
Yeah.
So, and in a way of making sure that they never figure it out is to always be in character.
Mhm.
And even as we see a death of kayfabe as it was, now where everyone is in on it that it's fake, and even WWE doesn't try very hard to be like, no, bro, this is real.
Yeah.
Um, it's still kind of almost baked into the tradition of wrestling to still kind of be in character. Like no one's forcing anybody to not be in character all the time, and it's not like you'll get punished if you do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's positive rewards to being in character of keeping kayfabe. Like if you go on social media and you keep kayfabe, especially if you're a really esoteric character like the Fiend Bray Wyatt,
Yeah.
then people will like praise you for that. Like people like
Mhm.
the fans enjoy that kind of extension of kayfabe outside of the realm of television. And I
Mhm.
won't lie and say that it's not kind of fun to see these characters still exist in some way or another outside of television. But I think what that does is now you can't really push the envelope the same way. Because, like, if you do a show where an actor or multiple actors play Klansmen, let's do a very extreme. Well,
Yeah.
they're not going to pretend to still be Klansmen after the show ends.
Yeah, we don't have John Goodman, dancing around in an eye patch, beating up George Clooney, and then going to a Klansman meeting IRL. It's just in the Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, but in wrestling, you're at least kind of encouraged to for if you were playing a Klansman on TV, you'd still at least kind of encouraged to still be kind of a racist to kind of sell the
Mhm.
idea that your actual this is real. This isn't just fake scripted crap. This is real. And so
Yeah.
I think the fact that like wrestling blurs this line between what is real and what is not real makes it harder to push the boundaries in terms of what isn't real. Like it's all a little more uncomfortable when you're not just playing a character who is blatantly raping a woman on television. You're encouraged to keep kind of being that guy.
And if I can get up on my slightly smaller and shoddier crafted soapbox next to you, um, I think another element to it too is by virtue of kind of how commercial wrestling presents itself in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that is played with a lot more irreverence. And you can do that in fiction. You can have black comedy where stuff like that is played for irreverence, but
Mm-hmm.
then still at the end everybody takes off their and like, yeah, there's plenty of discourse to be had about how appropriate that is, but like
Yeah,
but like you
I'm
can't.
not saying it's as simple as like every black comedy event is totally a-okay by
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, yeah. But it's a lot easier to make an okay feeling argument that like
Mm-hmm.
this is fiction. This is clearly meant to represent a negative thing, and it can be decently argued that the narrative is framing it as such.
Mm-hmm.
However, within this world, um, the there for as much as it's taking itself uber seriously, stuff like that between how what's his face is talking about getting to be with Melina,
Brian
um
Pillman.
Tillman, yeah. between how Tillman's talking about his time with Melina, between how fucking Lawler um just cannot shut the hell up about it. Um, between kind of like the general sexual politics of the day, it's played with this irreverence
Hmm.
um, that is pervasive, and because of kayfabe, does not never gets taken off for anyone to turn to the camera and say, in all earnestness, "Hey guys, this is all a game. We're all playing here. Don't
Like
think it's
everything's
okay to
cool,
do
everything's
this."
okay.
Yeah, for as much as it's a morality play, and for as much as there should be kind of a clear delineation between what's moral and what's not, I think the over the top villains like that aren't played as like the types of people that like are directly opposed to the audience's shared identity.
Hmm.
People like um the more kind of uppity, we're smarter than you characters. Like these guys are just like they're crazy redneck wild cards or whatever,
Hmm.
who just really like having sex, but they do it in a slightly not okay way. But it's still played with enough irreverence that that messaging feels a lot muddier, and feels a lot less responsibly presented, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, that's another thing too. Is I'll say it is that wrestling just isn't well, I fully believe that wrestling can be a very like smart. I'll put it like that, a very smart medium in terms of like storytelling and writing. It many times
Hmm.
isn't, and especially when it comes to controversial topics, it usually isn't,
Yeah,
and that makes it a whole
because it
lot
doesn't.
worse.
Well, because it doesn't leave room for nuance is the
Mhm.
problem.
Yeah, there is no there's very rarely if ever real nuance in wrestling.
I mean, it's a world where every problem is solved by people just punching each other a lot.
Hmm.
Like this is not a world of gray areas,
Hmm.
and not a
And that
world of difficult conversations. Because why
right.
have difficult conversations when you can just punch?
And they've tried in some ways to do that sometimes, and it usually kind of flops in a lot of ways. Like a thing I'll talk about is in 2005 they have this character called Muhammad Hassan, and funny enough he is Italian American, but he's
Hmm.
playing someone who is Middle Eastern descent, and
Yeah.
he's kind of like, and he's a heel, but he makes incredibly strong points of like, I'm angry and mad at America because of the discrimination I feel I am receive as a person who is a Muslim, who is someone who is Middle Eastern because of the effects of 9/11.
Yeah.
And he makes a lot of good points, but then the you get like the other side, like the good guys fighting against him do the incredibly stupid crap of like, well, there's violence and hatred everywhere, Hassan. It's not an American issue, or they'll say things like, but this is America. You can love it, or by God, you can leave it. I think I've lost count of how many times I've heard that phrase on WWE television
Uh,
on in there. So like, even when it tries to get nuance, it still kind of flops. Oh,
yeah.
and by the way, the storyline ends with eventually him basically being an Islamic terrorist.
Of course it does. Like I honestly, I'm not. I guessed that
And
punchline
it died.
as soon as you mentioned that he was making some cogent points. I guessed
and
that
then
punchline.
and then it died totally because they did the angle with him being in it doing his terroristy things and as much as allowed on WWE television on it, like basically the whole story is that they filmed this show because they filmed it was for SmackDown, so they filmed it on a Tuesday, and then it aired the same day as the 7/7 bombings in London.
Oh
Like
shit.
that angle aired the exact same day. The complete coincidence like could not stop it. But and
Oh,
so then they just quietly ended the whole thing.
holy shit.
It's like, oh dear.
Oh
like
shit.
like the timing couldn't have been worse, but then of course you could argue, why did you have to go there in the first place?
Oh fuck.
Hmm.
That's not fun.
No, it is not.
Oh
But
boy.
yeah,
Well,
back to the point of like, even when it tries to do nuance, it doesn't really stick with it.
yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate because we get weird crap like the Molina thing.
Mm-hmm. Um,
And yeah.
I feel like I don't want to end the episode on that kind of a note, but
But like, I mean, I think we can lighten it up again just by
Mhm.
being like, fucking '90s, man. Like this is very clearly an era of ups and downs for the WWE or the WWF, pardon me.
Mhm.
Like it's very clearly this thing of like there were some um really dumb things put out in this era. You know, a
Mhm.
very much a product of Vince Russo's clearly bombastic style of writing.
Mhm.
Um, and for as much as I'm sure in the moment it all felt really cool to the fans, and you know, like you were talking about, like this how they got their fan base back. It kind of had like this
Is this
Edwardy
kind of
resurgence.
this kind of stuff?
Yeah,
And
yeah, and I'm sure back in the day it made everybody feel like major badasses, but now you look at it and it's just so silly. Um, and I mean,
it feels very more than I think any other time in wrestling. It feels a lot harder to get into if you weren't there.
yeah, I'm getting into it in my own way, just not in the way
Sure, but not in the
that
way that
Vince
everybody
Russo
else did, and
intended.
not in the way that anyone intended you to do.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that does lend itself its own charm though, just
Mhm.
kind of like the so weird, it's hilarious era. Um, you know, we're there. This is going to be. I think this podcast when we kind of have the Discord side of this podcast, there's going to be this always kind of really weird feeling duality between the silly and ridiculous that we get to laugh about and like the kind of serious and dour points of discourse that we need to have like kind of
Mhm.
serious discussions about. um but I think at the end of the day we can all kind of tie it back into this idea of this is like kind of like what I talked about a lot in the first episode. This is very clearly a cultural phenomenon.
Mhm.
um and and unfortunately we have to take it with its good and its bad and its ugly.
Mhm.
um and I think that is what makes it worthy of examination in this way. You know, I've been kind of so far feeling like, man, am I just really forcing it by trying to be like this analytical, philosophical mind
No,
about
this is
fucking
everything.
WWE?
This is kind of everything I want
Well,
in
and when I say
wrestling
and when I say
in
that,
discourse about pro
I
wrestling.
hope you don't mean I hope you know I don't mean it in the way of like I'm subscribing to the WWE is for dumb people trope. Just more in the
No.
line of like, is this is this content that anyone outside of us could get anything meaningful out of?
Mhm.
But I think so. Kind of what we've seen so far, I think there is a lot of really valid cultural impact to be analyzed here.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it'll be tough and uncomfy to talk about because yeah, WWE, WWF, whatever has problems, has had problems, is led by a complete egomaniacal weirdo, um, who's only become more so over the past decades. Just with every passing day becomes a little bit weirder and a little bit more psychotic.
Mhm.
Um, um, and that's going to have some negative ramifications, both kind of like in its own little microcosm in the world and on the people who watch it and kind of take its messaging seriously. But that being said, there's still plenty to celebrate here too. Um, and I think at the end of the day, I want to find the balance um, yeah, we recognize the screwed up parts, um, and let's take that um, and use it to kind of envision and hope for a world where entertainment like this can be presented in a smarter way, in a more nuanced way. And then along the way, we get to treat ourselves to all of the really cool moments and all of the split your pants, dying of laughter, it's so fucking ridiculous moments
Mhm.
that I've just been treasuring thus far this episode specifically.
Mhm.
Um, So I think this podcast is always going to have a little bit of a weird Jekyll and Hyde personality when it comes to like the duality of wrestle. Um, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And man, this is going to be a long episode. So thank
Two
you all
two
for
hours,
sticking with
about
us
two
for this
hours
one.
10 is I think is what this ends out to.
Yeah, this is gonna be a big boy.
All right, where we go next?
Ooh, that's a good question.
We've hit Lucha Underground. We've hit,
Mm-hmm.
which is the one, almost like the one thing I really wanted to show. uh,
Well, I think there's one. If we're doing if 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 these beginning episodes are kind of an introductory what's the term, like a tasting platter.
mm,
Um, I think there's one more major thing we got to hit.
what would that be?
Uh, let's would it be at all possible next time to move a bit more eastward in our cultural examination of the wrestling world?
I'll have to think on that because we don't really watch super long shows. So
Wait, are they long over? Or how long are those shows?
um well, New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't really do television doesn't do television the same way WWE does. So it's kind
Okay.
of it's like the way they do it is they have clusters of shows that they just kind of air that all
Okay.
follow an arc, follow a plot, usually a tournament, and then it all kind of builds up to one big show. And so they don't do like 2 hour weekly television. It's more of like their biggest tournament of the year. They do 19 shows in 30 days, and then they take like 3 weeks off.
Oh Jesus.
So it's a lot harder for as long as we're still kind of working in the confines of a television of like a regular episode of TV that's only going to be a 1 or 2 hours. I
Hmm.
don't know if we can do something with New Japan. That might have to be something we save for a time when we're ready, when we have like the time and desire to really kind of do a show that's longer.
That's fair, like a marathon day or something.
Yeah. I was thinking is that like I kind of like this idea of fives. You know, we've had 3 episodes of a fifth episode before we kind of recycle our way back to stuff we've gone through before.
Hmm.
It's kind of this is the fifth can kind of be kind of like a whatever almost of like whatever
So
like something that isn't WWE but something that doesn't fit with that isn't Lucha Underground or WWE, but something I don't necessarily want to see us do like every single time.
how about something from the indie scene?
That is what I was going to think of, and it's not really indies, but it's not. It is smaller than WWE. As I was thinking, next time we hit up All Elite Wrestling, which is the current like their WWE's biggest competitor right now.
I
Kind of
would be
see how
delighted to
and
hit
kind
up
of see
some
a modern and kind of see modern wrestling another way.
I would be delighted to hit up AEW.
Yep. In that case, what we will do next time. We're gonna go get All Elite.
Yes. All right. Look forward to it. I'm
Yep.
ready.
See you guys next time.
So long.